Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Boris.
And again, welcome to everyone who is joining us on the internet. Once again, I will not be reading from either the first or second edition of the course, but from the final transcript as it was typed by Bill Thetford. I'm doing this for a reason. And that is because I'm able to provide a constant reminder that the Course isn't just a document transcribed by someone who was willing to transcribe it. It was a communion between me and Helen and Bill. And it represents the nature of my relationship with every single one of you. A current relationship, whether it's been activated or not by virtue of your desiring to talk with me, commune with me, learn with me, and make the connection. It's important for you to understand that my speaking with Helen was not a special dispensation, but the natural, normal way things work. When you're aware of this, it makes it possible to experience the fact as you're reading the Course that the sharing of the Course and the communion was an act of love, a living act of love, not just a mechanical repeating of words that needed to be put in print. But an active, living love that I'm engaged in always with all of you. To read the Course, to study it, isn't just about learning words and new meanings and you diligently applying them to your mind and your lives. It's about the fact that the Christ is the living Christ, living and loving you today. Caring enough about you to go to great lengths to help you remember who you are and to be unafraid to wake up, to be unafraid to abandon the practice of control that keeps you blinded to the truth about you and reality. I know there will be many who will be angry at what I'm going to say, but if all you did was pick up this book and in the first chapter realize that I was available to Helen and that I'm available to you, and you set the book down and devoted yourself to establishing your connection with me, that's all you'd need. In the meantime, this book is full of valuable information, which, if you're not reading it for the purpose of absorbing the information as information, but you are reading it with the awareness that you're reading a communication that was occurring. It will reinforce your desire to have the same experience. And the truth that's shared will help you to be less and less afraid of having that experience of communion with me or the Holy Spirit or your guide. That's why I'm doing it. So, the subject of this section is the ego and false autonomy. And we've been talking in the last couple of weeks about the fact that you have, in effect, stolen authority from God so that you could pretend to exercise it yourself on your own. You have attempted to establish autonomy. Well, obviously the autonomy has to be false, purely imaginary. The ego is false autonomy. It's a fantasy. So, from the book, and you will find today that sometimes there are almost whole paragraphs that will not be found in the first and second edition. I encourage you not to say, oh, I've lost my place, and scramble through the pages and completely lose your place. Just wait until the next sentence comes up. No questions. You have asked lately how the mind could ever have made the ego. This is a perfectly reasonable question. In fact, the best question you could ask. There is, however, no point in giving an historical answer because the past does not matter in human terms, and history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. There have been many occasions where in a gathering someone would ask me about my childhood. And I neglect to amplify on history. Why would you want to know about what my life was like 2,000 years ago when what my life is right now is available to you right now as an illustration of what you truly are right now? And it doesn't really matter why it was that you decided to try to see things in your own way. It only matters that right now you're insisting on seeing things your own way. And that flaw, if you will, in the now needs to be undone in the now. If you realize this, it will help you to understand that it really doesn't do much good to try to resolve past issues with each other, to go back and rehearse the past and try to figure out what went wrong. If you have a grievance with a brother now, handle the grievance now. Deal with what you are presently feeling. Oh, well, I'm feeling something about the past. But you're feeling it now. What is the feeling now when you are with this brother that you have a grievance about because of something that happened in the past. You will find resolution much swifter if you deal with what you are feeling now. This is important. Continuing, abstract thought applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. Now, knowledge is another word for knowing with a capital K. And knowing is your perception, not perception, but experience of the truth. And the experience of truth is a revelation from God. It's what you experience when you turn toward the altar to inquire as to what the truth of a thing is. Knowing is different from thinking. Continuing, perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. Each man makes one ego for himself, although it is subject to enormous variation because of its instability, and one for everyone he perceives, which is equally variable. If you happen to run into someone you haven't seen since you were teenagers, you have no means to connect with them except in terms of the way you last knew them. In fact, you might remember quite well some unkind thing that was done, or a way of behavior that was peculiar to that person at that time, and your assumption will be that that is the way they are now, and you will relate to them first on the basis of how you last knew them. Now that's a perception that you have in your mind, a picture you have in your mind. And so, in spite of the fact that over the years they may have grown and developed and be quite different, you will be relating to an ego you have made up about that person. And you may have awkward moments as you are confronted with who that one is now and have to adjust your perception, you see. So you have a picture of yourself, a concept of yourself, a definition of yourself, and you have a concept of everyone else. And then you deal with this someone else on the basis of your perception rather than a real connection with them. It's that simple. Continuing or repeating, each man makes one ego for himself, although it is subject to enormous variation because of its instability, and one for everyone he perceives, which is equally variable. Their interaction is a process which literally alters both, because they were not made either by or with the unalterable, meaning that they were not built upon a direct connection with the excellence of the other person from the excellence within you. It is particularly important to realize that this alteration can and does occur as readily when the interaction takes place in the mind as when it involves physical presence. How many of you have been in a tense situation with someone, and you happen to go to the store, and you see them, and you decide you don't want to run into them, but you're pretty sure that they saw you, and because they are the ones who owe you the apology or are responsible in your mind for correcting the inequity that exists, you know that in their seeing you and then they're not coming up to you, that they were avoiding you. And then you finish your shopping and get in the car and leave, and you begin to smolder inside because of how uncaring they were when they had the opportunity to correct the situation and didn't. Now, let us say that that person didn't see you at all. And you're sitting there smoldering because, first of all, you have a concept of them that is upsetting to you. And then you have a concept, then you have a concept about their behavior in this interaction that didn't even occur. And you're bouncing off your sense of yourself in this situation and your sense of them, and none of it touches reality in any way. You are getting upset because you're playing the part of your ego and the part of their ego in your mind. And then you wonder why they're surprised when you do actually come face to face with them and you express your distress with them. It's rather like going to bed at night and your wife or your husband has a dream about the other and wakes up in the morning and it says, I had the most awful dream last night about you. You did such and such and such and such and you were very insulting. How could you do that? You know, I'm really upset with you and I can't get it out of my mind. There you are, playing the part of your ego and playing the part of the other's ego and upsetting yourself. And in expressing the upset as though it were based on something real, you put the other one at a loss to be able to respond because there's nothing real about it to respond to. And that brings a stress, a misunderstanding, a lack of communication into your real relationship with your brother or your mate or whoever it is that had the dream about you, you see? And this is pretty much an example of life, the way you go through your day every day. Because very few of you consistently relate from the excellence in you to the excellence in your brother. And if you are not relating from the excellence in you to the excellence in your brother, all that's going on is you bouncing off your concept of yourself and your brother, and communication isn't occurring at all. Thinking about another ego is as effective in changing relative perception as is physical interaction. There could be no better example of the fact that the ego is an idea, though not a reality-based thought. Now, this is true of all of you, but I was talking to Helen and Bill when I said this. Your own present state is a good example of how the mind made the ego. You do have knowledge at times, in other words, true perception and experience of truth. You do have knowledge at times, but when you throw it away, it is as if you never had it. This willfulness is so apparent that one need only perceive it to see that it does happen. If it can occur that way in the present, why is it surprising that it occurred that way in the past? And I would add, and why would you try to go back to the past to correct it? Correct it now, where it's currently happening. And how do you correct it? You correct it by not taking yourself seriously, this ego that you think you are, and not taking the picture you have of your brother seriously, as the ego you've created for them, and abandoning the court in which you bounce off of the two sides of the relationship, all in your own head. Psychology rests on the principle of the continuity of behavior. Surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, but hardly to something that has occurred with such persistence. I am using your present state of how the mind can work, provided you fully recognize that it need not work that way. In other words, there's another way to look at what you're experiencing than through your definition of yourself and your definition of your brother. Do you hear that? There's another way to do this than to bounce off your definition of yourself and your definition of your brother. Many times, you're standing with a friend or a neighbor or an acquaintance, and you appear to be having a conversation, and the whole time you are bouncing off your definition of yourself and your definition of them, and you're leaving them out entirely. And they are doing the same thing with you. And because there's no actual connection with the real ones who are standing there in front of each other, ultimately the apparent communication becomes obviously poor communication, becomes an argument, becomes a misunderstanding, becomes hurt feelings, and you say the other one is to blame. And yet, one of you never managed to stand there and abandon the self-definition that was being employed, or the definition of the other one that was being employed, so that one of you could come from the place of excellence in you with the intent to connect with the excellence in the other one, regardless of whether the other one was able to see it or experience it or not. Why are you surprised that something happened in the dim past when it is so clearly happening right now? You forget the love that animals have for their own offspring and the need they feel to protect them. This is because they regard them as part of themselves. No one disowns something he regards as a very real part of himself. Interesting. No one disowns something he regards as a very real part of himself. And yet, the fact is that you've all disowned your father. In your attempt to be an independent authorizer, to have the thrill of making something that has never been made before, and the thrill of making your mark in the world, which, as I've said before, is nothing more than the kingdom of heaven with your definitions applied to it and your conscious ignoring of what it really is. You have disowned what is part of you. And in actuality, you have disowned what is the totality of you. And you've done it for so long that you don't remember that you did it. And that's why I'm talking to you, to remind you that you have abandoned your source, and now you don't even think you have one other than your own capacity to define yourself to yourself and even redefine yourself over and over into a better and better self. And all the time that you are doing this, having disowned your source, you're in a state of self-ignoration, of self-denial that is uncomfortable. And you recognize that you're uncomfortable, but you think that's just the way life is. And so you don't challenge its legitimacy. And I'm here to express the truth so that you realize there is a different way to look at this, and you find a willingness in you to challenge the way you're seeing everything, the definitions you've given everything, and ultimately to challenge your supposed capacity to authorize and create anything. Because in doing that, in challenging it successfully, the discomfort of existence will disappear. And the peace and the joy and the happiness that you know it's your birthright to be experiencing, without it costing you anything, will be your experience. Now that's a worthy reason for at least playing around with challenging the authority you think you have. To play around with the possibility that there's meaning to everything other than that meaning which you have given it. Because in that way, you open yourself up to breakthrough, to insight, to inspiration that will provide you with evidence that indeed there is more to everything than you're seeing. And whatever you've been doing to blind yourself to it is not worth continuing, so that you have even more enthusiasm for playing with the possibility that you have no capacity whatsoever to be creative by yourself all alone. Man reacts to his ego much as God does to his souls, with love, protection, and great charity. The reaction of man to the self he made is not at all surprising. In fact, it duplicates in many ways how he will one day react to his real creations, which are as timeless as he is. The question is not how man responds to his ego, but what he believes he is. Just let that sink in for a moment. The question is not how man responds to his ego, but what he believes he is. Do you believe that you are an ego that you've created? Or do you believe that you are something far beyond anything you could imagine.